Hi everyone, it is Toby and today we're drawing this, painting this using ink, watercolor and a pencil. But this isn't just a normal pencil, we're not going to be drafting our image with it. Instead, it's a water-soluble graphite. A really fun way of applying tone in a gentle way with gentle texture. And something which is great to use when we're doing something with so much detail like this rather interesting boat. So we are going to be drawing this really fun, fascinating, complicated boat, and we're just going to go for it. We're going to do our normal processes, and that starts with shapes. So let's get started. Now, a nice way of starting is to sort of trace out in your mind, or figuratively or literally sort of trace on the page, how big is your shape going to be. And I'm going to expand this boat to be a little bit bigger in my image than perhaps it is on the reference. And then we're just finding, look, simple shapes. So yes, this boat is complicated, but it's still got these really simple shapes. You can find even these little, not sure what they are, what to call them even, the sort of columns, just sort of triangles with their noses cut off. Really simple ideas from, admittedly, something which is very, very complicated. But that's okay. It's okay. Well, in fact, art is about simplification. It's more than okay. It's basically necessary to simplify, at least at the start, in almost all art. And if we come across, you can find the sort of back of the boat as well. And the proportions may not be exactly right. I think they're okay at the moment, but they're, by the end, I'm sure there'll be some proportion errors and things like that. But that's okay as well. For me, it's about getting the idea of this scene, not a perfect replica of the scene, but the idea. So we're just wandering around, finding the biggest shapes. I'm not going to focus on details yet. Details would be things like, we've got this little sort of skeleton, little crane, or I'm not sure, aerial, something like that going up there. I'm not going to focus on that yet. What we're going to do instead is just these big areas, these big shapes. And coming up, we sort of get to the other edge of the boat. So here we can bring it across and repeat the shapes so that we get the boat sort of feeling a bit symmetrical, which is always quite a pleasing place to be in your image when you've got something symmetrical. Now you can see an error has crept in. I've got the wrong number of sort of, pylons, whatever we're going to call these, wrong number of structures up there, but that's fine. Who cares? It's a sketch. I'm doing straight with ink. Of course things are going to go wrong, but it's how you deal with it and how you respond which makes you the artist, rather than worrying about it and having to restart and restart. So coming up here, just getting these shapes a little more solid, and now we can move on to some of these other sort of complicated areas where we've got lots of horizontal shapes coming across, cutting in between these two, I don't know what I called them last time, structures. We'll just stick with a simple word for today, so structures. Then this kind of continues this idea, doesn't it? We've got lots of little horizontal structures just all over the scene. And here's these sort of lots of cubes, and along we've got this white top to our boat. And then coming up here, we've got the sort of very front, what I assume is the wheelhouse in here. And it doesn't really matter what I assume it is. All we're trying to do really is draw the shapes that we see. And for me, so for example here, look, I'm drawing the lifeboat shapes here, a couple of little ellipses, and I've not drawn what's underneath them, because for me it's more important to get these recognizable shapes in and then kind of work out the rest around it. So now that this is here, we can go, right, well, there has to be this horizontal structure underneath, so we'll fit that in, and then we can work out there's some more sort of horizontal structures over here, a few complicating bits up here, got little small areas. Now we can start focusing on those details, because now those details are actually what fills all the space and lets us know if we've done a good job or a terrible job or something in between. And normally it's not perfect, it's not awful, it's just something in between all the above. There we go. Now we can start just fitting in some of these little windows and some of these doors as well that we see. And I'm being you know me, I'm being purposefully loose. I'm not trying too hard to get the exact feel of this. And for me, that's going to make sketching this a more enjoyable experience. Now, if I wanted to create something more perfect afterwards, great. I've sort of lived the experience of sketching this boat. I've sort of discovered bits which have gone wrong. So, for example, we can see the proportions now. The hull's too tall. Yeah, okay. So now I know for next time if I want to do this again. But I'm not going to just stop and start a new one. I'm going to keep going and see with all of this what happens. What happens? What are the other pitfalls I'm going to inevitably fall into? Now, for me, I don't tend to then go and do what we call a finished piece of work. For me, I think the art is the fun you had. It's the looseness you created. You don't need to repeat it necessarily. I do like repeating scenes, but I like approaching them in different ways. I like approaching them in my mood. So it's just I don't know, I've got very philosophical today, haven't I? Really, what I'm trying to say is art is about yourself. It's not really about anyone else. You know, if you're creating commission, it is, but then that person hopefully commissioned you with an understanding of what you are about. And, you know, everything else, you're just not going to enjoy it if you're not doing it for you. So make sure that when you are making your decisions about how to approach art and how you're sort of focusing in that artistic journey, just make sure you're doing it for you. That's something I've learned the hard way, I think, over the years. So we've kind of got a lot of the shapes going on in the boat. Now I'm just connecting the boat to what's around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this line all the way across, all the way off the edge of the paper, and then I'm going to catch it on the other side and bring it all the way across again. There's a little boat back here actually, which I've only just noticed, and that's quite a fun touch, isn't it? So let's add that little boat in. We can take that idea over here as well. Why not just add? It's probably totally unrealistic to have these boats this near this big boat, but you know what? My art. So let's just see what happens if we just add some suggestions of little sailboats in the background. I just saw this one here and I thought, that's fun. Similarly, we've got little buoys. They're going to be nice spots for colour, and we can, again, add a few more. And I imagine someone who knows about boats will go, that's not realistic. You'd never have a buoy there. But you know what? In this particular scene, like in all of your art, you're in control. So don't worry about making mistakes in that sense. You know, just do what you want to do. Have fun. Have the art your way. Over here, we're going to just grab this approximate shape of this cliff. I'm just finding, I say cliff, this is a hill, we'll call it a hill. Within it there are some sort of rocky outcrops, escarpments, that kind of thing. And I'm just finding approximately where they are, giving them this kind of geometric outline. So we can just then solidify the shape a little bit. And I think we're looking almost like we are done with this first bit of sketching. I'm just going to come back. We've been talking about shapes. I said, look, we're not going to do little shapes yet, but then I did kind of move back and start doing some little shapes. Now I really am going to look around and look for some of those smaller shapes. So this is I split things up into processes. I think that's the easiest way to learn, is if you have things that you can trust and you can go through. But also it's a fluid process. So although we know there's big shapes and little shapes, sometimes you might start with little shapes. So in places I have added some little shapes already, but towards the end, fairly inevitably, we want to start adding more and more of those little shapes. So coming around and finding even things like the suggestion of this writing, this lip of red, that's a little shape. This little structure, which got me actually talking about little shapes in the first place. Then there's lots of little bits and pieces. Again, the perspective here is not quite right. I've kind of opened it out a little bit, looking down on it. But, you know, that's okay. That basically means I've got my horizon line a little bit wrong. Something we talk about a lot in my online courses on sketchloose.co.uk. Getting the horizon line right is a key part of getting your perspective right. And here you go. I've done it wrong, but it doesn't really matter as long as you recognise that and you sort of respond to that with how you approach the rest of your sketch. Over here we've got little grate marks. There's things getting lost because the lines are getting bold in some places and they're still light in others. That's okay. You know, this is what's going to happen. We can come back later and correct that. I'm going to find some of these key shadows. There's a lot of shadow going on in this scene. But I'm not sure that I want to make my watercolors as dark as they would need to be to really portray that shadow. So instead, what we can do is use a little bit of hatching. And that simulates the idea of shadow, but still lets us use lovely, bright, transparent watercolors. So we can just find, quite neatly, a few areas of shadow in and around. And this might be an opportunity to try out some watercolor pencils or something later as well. If we want really specific textured shadow, then they can be a really great touch to use. Coming down, we've got shadow under the boat, of course, just to the side here. And some of these areas are really dark. So here we can go a bit more for the hatching. And hopefully we're just building up a little bit of shape. Not a huge amount yet, but you know what? Early days. You've got to trust the process in sketching. And with that, let's leave it be. Leave our pen, put it to the side, and we'll call this shape step 1 finished. And we will move on and start splashing on some loose colours. And there we go. So I'm back. I had to just change my water a little bit, so apologies if there's any obvious continuity errors there. But other than that, we're with the same sketch and we're ready to go. And I'm going to jump in with my mop brush. And I'm going to start, like I normally do, with the light blues in the sky. So a little bit of cobalt blue, splash that in on top of some water. And because this boat has lots of lovely soft shadows on it, we can bring that blue down actually through the boat, because all this is in shadow. And I said I didn't want to make my colours dark, but it doesn't mean I can't simulate the shadow using these sort of bluey tones. I'm just not going to make it quite as murky as it is in the reference. And I've got to say, I'm not criticising the reference, it's just that level of contrast is an amazing photography effect. But in watercolours, achieving that level of contrast is perfectly possible, but it requires quite a texture of watercolour that I don't enjoy. So it requires your watercolours to be quite thick, which loses this beautiful transparency, which is what I personally love about watercolours. Now in here, I'm going to use a little bit of lunar black, and we'll see if that lunar black, look how heavily it granulates, look at all that texture. What I'm hoping is that will provide a feeling of darkness, but without having to be thick and overly textured. I want things, as you probably are aware, I want things to be nice and loose. So I'm going to let my colours blend up and down between the black and the blue. And that will again hopefully enhance the feeling of connection between the boat and the sea, because they are, you know, intrinsically connected. Off to this side, I should say off to this side, the reason I'm reaching over, I've got a towel. So between washes, I tend to just dry, especially with a mop, it's got a lot of water in it. So we want to just dry that off to make it something we can control. So if I dry it loads, I can actually pick up lots of water from my page. If I wet it and I don't dry it, I get a lot of water on my page, and that's going to change the texture of our colours. So I'll just leave my towel just here actually for now, so we can, people have asked about that a fair bit, so I'll leave it there so I can remember to talk about it. Now there's areas of this boat which are clearly white. They are bright, they're sunny, and I'm going to just actually touch in little bits of yellow. That yellow is me going, this is white, but I'm suggesting the light. I'm suggesting that shine by applying this bright tone instead of just leaving it white. I want to leave lots of white as well, but I'm taking sort of mixed approach. So one part of that approach is realism, it's white. Another part of that approach is sort of representative colours, so colours which aren't actually there just because the actual colour is there, they're there to represent within the scene something. So in this case, this yellow is representing that bold light. The other reason I'm adding it is because I know there's some yellow objects. We've got this yellow here, they're going to come in later. So I want that yellow to be balanced, and if it's in a couple of places, it will naturally feel more balanced when we get there. Got some nice reds as well. Some of these reds are rather shadowed, so we'll work that out as we move along, how we sort of impart more of that shadow. We've also got lots of little circles which don't in reality have any colour, but I'm going to just start touching in a few little bits of colour into some of them, because that's also something that out in our buoys we can start using these same colours. This bit of turquoise, bit of red here. Let's use our yellow again. We can make up another buoy there, another buoy there. And to keep this bright and punchy feel going, let's enhance some of these boats that we've invented. So we'll get some yellow in one. Just cleaning my brush, drying it, and we can just drag that yellow down into the sea like a little reflection. We take some blue for another one. Same process, clean my brush off, drag it down for a little reflection. And over here, a little bit of red. Same process, clean the brush off, dry it, drag it down. It's going to drag into this yellow buoy and cause a bit of reflections. That's really fun as well. Now that we're doing reflections, so remember, reflections are coming straight at us. So they have to come down the page. So what we do is we find them and we do a little bit like this. Now, if you can hear my dog in the background, she's asleep and she's one hell of a dreamer. So she'll probably be doing her little sleep woofs, as we call them in our house, little sleep woofs for the next minute. Apologies for the slightly cute little woofy noise in the background there. Anyway, back to sketching. Now that we've got a bit more tone on our page, I'm going to add a little bit more of this lunar black just in a few places over this boat. And this is just going to hopefully again have a nice textured way of getting a bit more value into the boat without making it too murky. Something just a bit different, a bit interesting for today. With that, drop a few bits in, let that move around. Drop a few bits of blue to move up as well. So that blue's going to move up into the boat and down into the sea. A few little splashes of blue I think do well. And now, this little light layer of colour we've got going, I'm just going to soften a tiny bit of some of these edges, stop it feeling too overworked. And then we're going to let it dry, come back with a smaller brush and do some more controlled touches and a little bit more sort of thoughtful painting, less sort of intuitive and a bit more thought put into how we get more shape and more feeling into this boat. And we are back and we're mostly, not entirely, but mostly dry. Now we're going to have a bit of fun now. So I've got a bit of water soluble graphite. I'm going to use a 6B, actually quite a dark pencil. And we're going to use this like a watercolour pencil. And this is going to be a nice way that in something quite specific like this boat, you know, it's got lots of little shapes. We can gently apply some shadow. We can actually layer this rather effectively with a really simple bit of shading. That shading shouldn't impact too much the colours we've already got there, the textures, but it will also apply its own texture a little bit. This means we can just apply some really gentle, specific shadows without, you know, the muddy running of colours, just as something different to try today. I've been experimenting with these after, again, people use these in my course, so a few people have got them, and you know what, this is a really nice way of applying tone and value to a sketch. A bit different, but has a very lovely feel. Having done that, all we need to do, just like a watercolour pencil, we can activate that and we'll see, look, that just comes to life. So you need to be quite gentle because look how much tone is suddenly being applied to that page just by the little application of water to the graphite that we've laid down. So I want to be gentle, not apply water everywhere, or we'll have a very dark boat, which is what we're trying to avoid. But at the same time, I do want to get that increased feeling. Now that the page is wet as well, we can enhance a few areas. You'll see, look, as I just draw in a few places, look how dark that graphite is. And here we talked about this area being particularly dark, so let's just use our graphite there and touch that in. And I should say I'm including this. I normally talk about step 3 being the bold colours. I'm including this little use of graphite as step 3. So we'll add this graphite in, and then we're going to come and touch in some other bright colours as well. There's bright, bold touches. Back here, I think we've got room for a bit more tone as well. Just like that. Just getting that sort of slightly murky feeling. And then a few bright touches. Let's get some yellows going back in there. We can lift some of these shadows, just that kind of touch of cobalt, the cobalt blue, for me, just provides a nice lift back into some places which can get murky. We probably want to enrich some of these reds just in a few places. Not trying to be too specific with how I'm laying down the red. And just like before, I'm going to come over to my towel, dry off my brush, and that's going to let me just soften some of these reds and move them around. Just like so. We're getting somewhere towards a finished image. Going to mix a little bit of yellow into these boats just to give them a slightly more varied feel. And I think with all this enrichment of the reds, we can enrich some of these shadows as well down here. And we can also take a little bit of indigo. I think that will do the job of just suggesting a better reflection of this boat coming down. And I'm just going to go backwards and forwards to the side to give that water effect as well. Just with the tip of the brush, get that effect of water, whilst also keeping that colour that's reflecting straight towards us. There we go. What else can we do? Well, I think at this point we need to pop our colours away. I always say this, don't I? Pop our colours away, but also I'm going to do a couple more touches in a few places. And then I need to pop my colours away because we don't want to overdo things. And we can still come back in, do a bit of restructuring with our pen, and then we can add some final touches. And the final touches is going to be including the boat, but also thinking about the background and whether we want to apply some tone or colour to the background, whether that will help the boat or hinder the boat. And we are now dry. So like I said, we're coming back with our pen and we're going to do some restructuring. This is where we can respond to our watercolours. We can redefine some shapes. We could even add more tone and value through some hatching. And fundamentally what we're doing in a busy image like this is we're picking out those key shapes, the important ones, and we're making sure that they are obvious, that they are evident, that they feel like they're at the front and centre of our image. So instead of losing them behind all the other bits and bobs going on, these little extra lines are lifting hopefully this boat forward, bringing it in front of all the noise. Dark hatching, dark lines like this to again promote that feeling of value and shadow without hopefully making things too murky. Coming up here with a nice bold line again, hopefully just to lift the boat forward. The lines in the back here don't need to be as bold because, well, they're in the back, they're further back, but also because there's less tone, there's less stuff interfering with the shape of the boat there. We can apply a bit more hatching just to show the shape. We can restate these shapes, and again remember these shapes aren't actually in the boat. I got this wrong, but we're responding to what we've done here at this stage. We're looking at our reference, but we're also really responding to what we've done, what's happened, what the watercolours have done, rather than just trying to reproduce the scene, because it may not be possible. Depending on, we're sketching, things will have happened we weren't expecting. They may be amazing happy accidents, or they may be frustrations, but it may not be possible at this stage to produce a perfect representation. So instead we want to make the best art we can, not the best sort of version of the scene we can, if that makes sense. A few little lines here, get these nice boat shapes I said were so important to me, really bring them forward. And then the top of the boat, this is again, it's the key, like silhouetting outlines. So it really needs to be nice and bold. Lots of these windows we can just add little bits of value to as well. And there we go. So what else can we add at this stage? We could do a few more of these little wires coming up, a few more of these little shapes we can see above the boat, a few more bits of sort of tone going on, apply some more of this shape here, just a tiny bit of extra detail, isn't it? We could do a little scroll on the boat. So I'm actually going to just do it in little handwriting to make it fit the rest of the field. This is just my version of writing Caledonian McBrain. If I tried to do it in a neat fashion or like the boat itself, I know it would go wrong. I know my handwriting is terrible, so I'll do it my way. Thank you very much. But if you have good handwriting, if you have a Posca pen, you might do it in white. If you have, for example, some masking fluid, you could have done that kind of mark at the very beginning as well. Yeah, a little bit more hatching, I think, can do well here. Just a bit of slightly bolder hatching. The hatching has faded quite a lot behind the graphite, so we know it will accept a little bit more texture. And there we go. I think that's enough from our pens. So like I said, let's come back in, last little go with our colour, and decide what we might want to do. Well, for me, the image, perhaps it's feeling a little bit flat. So perhaps a nice gentle green in the background will lift this boat forward. And I think it's okay to leave it white as well, but let's have a go at just popping in a gentle, slightly varied green. We'll add some yellow in places. I'm using my smaller brush here because I'm trying to be a bit neat. I'm trying to be a bit illustrative. I'm trying to keep the boat clean from the background wash rather than my normal approach, which would be to let things mix and mingle. I've already done the mixing and mingling. Now we're on to finishing touches where we normally try and be a little bit more specific. And that lets us bring this green all the way down into these little gaps. And it really, hopefully, will accentuate the shape of the boat. In places I've gone a bit dark there, so that was poor water control. But I can come back in, dry my brush off, and I can lift it out. You can lift it in a couple of places as well. I mean, lift it in the sort of metaphorical sense here with a little bit of yellow. And again, just a little bit of variation with some deeper blues. Now we move back here, same idea. Trying to keep these sails, like over here, I kept the sail clear. Keep these sails clear as well. And as we get further from the boat, we get looser, until we just have a few splashes going around. And I think that was a good idea. I'm happy with that. I think that has really lifted it. I'm going to do one more step along the road and just add some shadow into these cliffs. Again, using, this is mostly that lunar black. And that's just a little bit more extra shape for our background, which we've only just added in the final touches. Again, this goes to show that when I talk about these processes, they're fluid, so you don't have to follow them exactly. They're just a guideline to give you some confidence, to give you a bit of structure in how you're approaching your scene. I'm going to slightly increase some of the shadows in here, just in a couple of places. Perhaps this little bubble can be a bit bluer because that suggests it's coming from the sea. Really don't want to do too much here because I am at risk of overworking things. I think some splashes will help. I think a couple more little buoys in the sea, just specific dots of this colour. A bit of yellow, a bit more yellow here. Maybe just touching in things here and there. And then last but not least, this is probably not the last thing. I always lie about this, don't I? But I want to just get these yellows we talked about at the beginning. Just in a couple of places, get these ideas that some of these lovely objects sticking out are yellow. And a little bit of final sort of red as well. And I know I'm making it up in places here, but again, this is about the art, not for me about being precise. It's about what do I think this image needs. I think it just needs a bit of the colour sort of balancing around across the place so that it feels quite unified rather than feeling too like disparate, separated. There we go. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. This is definitely my approach, and how many of you think this is a good approach? How many of you enjoy taking this approach? How many, go, yeah, okay, that's interesting, but I'll do it my way, thank you very much, which I totally respect. Up here, a couple of splashes of blue just to balance out that little yellow into the sky. And I think we better call this one done. So quite a mad little boat. Really now, I think it is jumping, pushing off the page, which is what I was after. Loads of detail, lots of suggestions of detail, lots of made-up colours and little made-up boats. But I think the scene as a whole working quite well for me. For something I don't normally paint. I don't normally sketch or draw boats, so it's not the easiest thing to do. Don't forget to sign your work. People have asked recently, why sign your work? Well, it's just a matter of owning it. in that like literal sense. It makes you feel more proud of something if you take the time to go, yeah, I did this. When you're putting that on as a stamp of approval, which just for me changes the mindset just a little bit. And there you go. Thanks for watching. Please do follow if you enjoy. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think of this kind of process. You can always join my courses on sketchlease.co.uk if you do, in fact, enjoy the kind of thing I produce. So thank you everyone for watching my little sketching videos. If you enjoy my content, please do subscribe to my channel because it makes me really, really happy. Thanks again.